Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. We are indeed thankful that our lives have been spared and we are here to worship the Creator who has been so good to us. This morning we would like to look at the subject beyond the veil in Yah's presence. Beyond the veil in Yah's presence. Instinctively, as we read that, we know that we are going through the sanctuary. We know that's the meeting place where Yah told Moses to meet him. Moses, go beyond the brazen altar, beyond the laver, beyond the first apartment, the older place, and into the most holy of holies, where the Shekinah glory is and the ark of the covenant. And so we come this morning to renew that thought, that notion, that commitment in the covenant. And therefore, it is our duty this morning to take a journey into the most holy. We want to look at, above all things, the sacrifices that were made during the Levitical era, and some of which, still exist in our practice. As you well know, there were 5 offerings that were made. You had the burnt offering, and you had the meal offering, or the grain offering, if you want to call it that, and you had the peace offering. This morning, we want to focus up on the sin offering and the trespass or the guilt offering. Why? Because these two are mandatory offerings, and the others are voluntary. So these are really expressions of worship. And we want to look at this morning the sin offering and the guilt offering. Understand that both the sin offering and the guilt offering, they deal with sin. How we deal with sin. When we have sinned, how do we deal with it? Because these are the must-do. These are mandatory. You cannot not do this and claim to have a relationship with Yah. So that's why, or one of the reasons why, I would like to look at these two and how they relate to us and how we relate to Yah when we have committed sin as we go through the sanctuary. Remember, Yah in Exodus chapter 25 and verse 8 said to Moses, build me a sanctuary that I may dwell with you. And moreover, Moses, I want to teach you the mechanics of salvation. That's what he told Moses. Now, come with me to Shemot, that's the book of Exodus, and we're going to read a verse here in chapter 20 and verse 11, just to emphasize a point I want to make. The word here reads, for in 6 days Yah made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that are in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore Yah blessed the 7th day and hallowed it. Let's hold it there and Look at that. Yah took 7 days. Well, he took 6 days, and he created the heavens and the earth and its content. All that is in them. What fascinates me, and perhaps ought to arrest your attention in the same way as it does mine, is that Yah created all these great things in 6 days. But when he was about to explain the intricacies of the tabernacle to Moses, it took 40 days. And obviously, that is of interest to us. It took 40 days to explain to Moses one piece of his creation, but yet it took 6 days to make the whole creation. And therefore, it behooves us to spend some time and study this creation of his, this tabernacle, because the tabernacle really looks at Yah's holiness and how we are to relate to him. There was a way that we relate to him. And it is interesting when Yeshua said to the disciples, and in speaking to the Pharisees and the scribes, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And oftentimes we glibly repeat that, not knowing the full content of the intent, because intent always precedes the content. So when Yeshua says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, what he's dealing with is the sanctuary. Let me explain. When a person in ancient Israel sinned, they would come to the brazen altar with their offering, and they would offer that offering as a substitute for them. And they would kill that offering, that animal, and the blood will be taken by the priest and placed upon the altar of incense. That would, and obviously the person who had sinned would place his hand upon the animal and figuratively, his sin. Whatever was happening was happening in their heart would be transferred upon the animal. That is the way. So after you understand the way, you move now down to the laver and you move into the holy place. That's where you learn. That's the truth. And so when you learn the truth of the 12 loaves, that refers to Yeshua, that he's the loaf, he's the manna, and you go over to the south side and you see the menorah, you know that he is the light. In fact, he was that light in Genesis when Yah said, let there be light, and light came forth, and he came and he said in John, I am the light of the world, and so you begin to learn. And so when you leave the way, because you have surrendered all that is to be surrendered at the brazen altar, and now you're learning about him in the holy place. So you leave the holy place, which is where we're going this morning, and you go into the life. Now you must live what you learn. And so when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, that's what he's saying. If you follow the teachings of the sanctuary, you will understand that by the time you get beyond the veil in Yah's presence, that's our topic today, then you live the life. That's what we're dealing with, and that's what the phrase or the sentence that Yeshua used. So come with me now to Leviticus, and we will look at chapter 4. Leviticus chapter 4. Because I think Yah wants to teach us something. Leviticus chapter 4. And we will begin at verse 1. Again, Yah spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say, when any person sinneth unwittingly before Yah, and doth any of these things, which by way of the commandments of Yah he ought not to do. If, for instance, the chief priest, that's the high priest, who hath, I'm reading from the Septuagint here. If, for instance, the chief priest who hath been anointed sin on the account of his causing the people to sin, he shall for the sin which he hath committed bring a young bull without the blemish from the earth before Yah for the sin offering. Let's look at that and let's dilate upon it and let's extrapolate from it. Let's bisect it and analyze it and see what it has in terms of teaching for us. Now understand the first thing here is that throughout the Levitical era and all that took place in the sanctuary, in the brazen altar, everywhere, the offerings were only dealing with sin that was unwitting. Meaning that if you sinned deliberately, there was no offering for that. There is no offering for a sin that is deliberate. In fact, if you sin deliberately, you would be banished from the camp and away from the presence of Yah, and you would be on your own. Are you following me? So today when we see people are sinning deliberately, they know what is right and what is true, but they do it anyhow. They would be banished from the camp of Israel, and they would be taken away, banished from the presence of Yah, and they would have no part in the congregation of Israel. And so this is only dealing with sin where you did not intend to sin. We need to understand that, because sometimes we know the thing is wrong and we do it and then say, well, I'll just pray about it. That's not how it works. And that's our misunderstanding of the sanctuary. It says this is dealing with sins that you did not intend. In fact, sin means when you miss the mark. Let me explain it this way. Think in terms of an archer. He has his bow and his arrow, and he aims studiously at the target. And he aims and he looks and he fires, but he misses the bullseye. He misses the target. His intent was not to miss the target, but to hit the target. So sin is, You wanted to do right, but by mistake, you ended up this way. That's what these offerings are for, not for deliberate sin. Understand that. So when Yah says that we ought to obey his laws, keep my Shabbat, and you deliberately know that the Shabbat is a day to meet with him, but you say that you will keep another day as the Shabbat, there is no offering for that. Understand that. But we don't get this, and we continue to labor in sin, believing it's right. You know adultery is wrong. You know fornication is wrong, but you continue to do it and think it's all right. There is no offering for deliberate sin, only for unintentional sin. That's what the word wants us this morning to understand. And moreover, it is saying if the chief priest, if your pastor sins, understand, let's go back for emphasis. Again, Yah spoke, and I'm reading from the Septuagint, Leviticus chapter 4, because I want you to get this. Again, Yah spoke to Moshe, that's Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, even as I'm speaking to you this morning. When any person sinneth, anyone, including the elder, including the pastor, including the bishop, including the priest, right? When they sin before Yah, and doth any of those things which by any of the commandments, when they break the 10 commandments, right? Tell them what they ought to do. And he makes an example of the priest. For instance, the chief priest who hath been anointed. Remember, he's anointed. At this time, the priest was acting as a mediator between Yah and the people. Therefore, he has a responsibility of authority. And the account of is causing the people to sin. When the priest, when the elder, when the pastor, when the bishop cause the people to sin, that's collateral damage. You need to understand that. Collateral damage means that the priest, the pastor, the bishop has misled the congregation and has caused them to sin. Are you with me? They have sinned because the priests have sinned. Notice here, the priest is asked to do what? To bring a bull. A bullock. That is the biggest of all the offerings. The biggest, because his authority, so he ought to have known better. So when your priest, your pastor, your bishop teaches you things that are contrary to and contravenes Yah's word, he has brought into that assembly collateral damage. Well, what do you mean by that? Collateral damage. Well, put it this way. Think of a war. Think of what's happening right now in Ukraine. Think of that. All right? In that context, collateral damage would be the killing of civilian in a military attack. You did not intend to do that, but you killed so many civilians in the attack on the soldiers. And so you have collateral attack or collateral damage. So any damage that is incidental to the activity, that's collateral damage. Let me say that again. Any damage that is incidental to the activity is collateral damage. That's why James in chapter 3 and verse 1 makes it clear that not all of us should be teachers of the word, because the teachers of the word, the bishop, the preacher, the pastors, they are going to be subject to more severe judgment from Yah, because they bring collateral damage up on the congregation because they have misled them. Are you with me? We need to understand that. So when the priest sins, he brings a bullock. Not like the ordinary person. I know you say, but elder, sin is sin. Yes, sin is sin. But the priest who has authority, it's like a teacher and a pupil. They have a duty of care to the student and to teach them in a way that is right. The pastor, the bishop, the elder has a responsibility that each morning when you come, he brings you new loaf. A new loaf, not stale bread, new loaf. Notice as they journeyed through the wilderness, every day manna would come. And the word says that don't leave anything on the next day. Don't. Except on a Friday, you collect a double portion. And so your pastor, your bishop, holds you a duty of care that when you come each Sabbath, you get a new loaf. And so this morning, as we go into that portion of the tabernacle, to look at what bread Yah has left for us this day, we are understanding what the offering was about. And some will say, but elder, these things are done away with. They're done away with. And well, let me make this point so you see that it has not been done away with. Come with me to the book of Deuteronomy. And we will look at chapter 21 and begin in verse 18. If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him, will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold of him and bring him out of the elders of the city and unto the gates of the place, and they shall say unto the elders of the city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of the city shall stone him with stones that he die. So shall they put evil away from among you, and Israel shall hear it and fear. And you say, see, elder, we don't stone our children. The method has changed. In fact, did you know in the 17th century, there was a law in America where unruly children could be stoned to death? That was passed here in America. Oh, yes. I'm just showing you how we have moved away from the principle. And someone says, Helder, this is done away with. No, the point I want to make is that the method of how you deal with the child is done away with. But the principle of, is this not in the commandment? Does the commandment not say children must honor their father and mother? It's still there in the commandment. Are you with me? So because it is not dealt with, Yah has taken away, so to speak, the responsibility from dealing with that. It's still a sin for a child to be unruly to their parents. It's no less a sin. But guess what? What does the fifth commandment say? Let's go to Exodus chapter 20 in verse 12. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long on the land which your Elohim is giving you. Is that done away with? No, the method of how you deal with the child is done away with. Yes? That's done away with. Adultery, people used to be stoned. But we don't deal with them that way now. Hear me? Let me put it another way. Both adultery and unruly children in the Bible time is what? It's a capital offense. It's deserving of death. And so people will say, well, we don't deal with that. And that's true. Then you have to come with me to Jude. Come with me to the book of Jude. Jude chapter 1. And we'll begin at verse 14. And Enoch also the seventh from Adam prophesied of these, saying, behold, Yah cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all. He's coming to do what? All these sins, unruly children, adultery, that we don't stone anymore, Yah is coming to execute judgment on them. He will deal with it. The judgment has already passed. So he's not coming to judge them. He's coming to execute the judgment, to deal with them. Are you with me? To execute judgment and all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches and ungodly sinners have spoken against him. These are the murmurers, the complainers, walking after their own lust, and their mouths speak at great swelling words, having men's person in admiration because of advantage. That's what he's doing. So we're seeing this, that when the priest, the chief priest, heard, when he made a mistake, collateral damage, because people will say, well, if it's good for the priest to do it, surely it's good for us to do it too. And they pattern that. But when I speak of the sin of the priest here, I'm talking the sin that he commits in his duty as priest, not his own personal sin. Because when he sins in his duty, he pollutes the whole tabernacle. It's serious. And so you understand in Revelation, when the word is saying, I like some of the things you have, but because you have Balaam and you have Jezebel teaching you, they mislead you. And when the congregation is misled, you have the killing of civilian, spiritual killing of the soul. And that's very, very important. So I want you to understand that. Very, very important. And so we're still dealing with those mandatory sins. That's the guilt offering and the sin offering. Now, the distinction between the sin offering and the guilt offering is that the guilt offering requires an act of restitution. What do I mean? Let's say, for example, you have a problem with someone, and you go to church, and this is why, I often say to people, one of the most difficult things for me on a Sabbath is to make up the program. To make up the program. And they see that as perhaps an easy thing to do, but not within the context of what we teach here and what we believe. Why do I say that? The word says that if you knows that someone is ought with you, didn't say if you did them anything. You have a brother or a sister who is angry with you and you're not on speaking terms, and you refuse to relate to them and they refuse to relate to you. But then you come to the altar to pray. Yeshua dealt with that. Yeshua said, if you know as you come to the altar to pray, someone is ought with you, leave. Go and put it right. Then return to the altar. Because he says, I will not hear your prayer when you refuse to do that. But we often ignore these things and we stitch great sentences together and we embroider them with praises. But yes, that I did not hear. I did not hear. Because don't forget, we are in or going to the most holy place where the Shekinah glory is, where Yah's presence is, and we can't even wear our shoes. You better ask Moses and Joshua, take your shoes off, because the place where you stand in is made holy by my presence. Moses, take it off. And meet me, Moses, later on in that holy place, most holy place. Meet me there. So when we come on a Sabbath morning, hear me, that's exactly where we're going. Because as I indicated earlier, that when you read Matthew chapter 27, you see that that veil that separated the holy place from the most holy place when Yeshua died was rent in twain. And therefore, that place was now what? Left open. There is no dividing line. There is no curtain separating us. So when we come in, we're coming into the holy place. Hear me? But you say, Elder, that was for the priests, not for the ordinary people. And you're right. And then my question to you would be, so what are you? And therefore, you have to come back to Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 and 6, because Yah made it clear. He said to the children of Israel, what did he say? He said, if you will obey me and do all my laws, my statutes, my ordinances, I will make you a kingdom of priests. You didn't hear me. I said it again. He did not say, I will make you a church of priests. He said, I will make you a kingdom of priests. So when you accept Yeshua, you are part of the commonwealth of Israel, and you living as the priest would live in the tabernacle. You've got to understand that. And so when you come to the altar to pray, you must examine yourself, just like the priest did. The priest went down to the laver, and the laver was made of bronze. Where did they get it? The bronze was a shiny bronze that the women brought from Egypt that they used for looking glass, so they could see their own picture, their own image. their own countenance. That's what we mean. Examine yourself in the light of the word and see what you see. And don't go into the most holy place if there is spot or wrinkle, because we read in Ephesians that he's coming for an assembly that what has no spot nor wrinkle in it. You see, we're still going through the sanctuary, but we came and we emptied our cargo of sin at the brazen altar. We are now learning about Yah in the place. Remember, I said he is the way, the truth. We're learning the truth now, and our destination is where? In the beyond the veil. Beyond the veil, where only the high priest could go on the Day of Atonement. You know that. But we now have access to that because we have a Messiah. We have an advocate who has torn that veil away and has given us access. And so we now not function as some people call them laity. You better lay that aside. We're not laity. The word says we are priests of the Most High. Isn't that what he says? And so I want you to come with me to the book of Malachi. Let's make that clear to you what happened. The book of Malachi. Malachi is that book that comes before Matthew, and we are told that there are 400 years between Malachi and Matthew. And that's the period we read in the Maccabees, where Greece, the Greek Empire, was in charge. When we leave Malachi, we have Persia in charge. And by the time we get to Matthew, Rome is in charge, another empire. Understand that. So what is Malachi saying? Malachi is saying, chapter 3, behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the what? The way before me, and Yahweh whom you seek. You're seeking him, right? Seek him and you'll find him. Shall suddenly come to his temple, even the Messiah of the covenant whom you delight in. Behold, he shall come, said Yahweh of hosts. He will come to his temple. But hold on. Where is he now? You ask in Malachi. Where is he? Well, come with me to the passage that Sister Sonia read earlier. Well, not Sister Sonia, but Sister Sonia. Revelation, book of Revelation, chapter 1. Sister Sonia read this. And she was trying to tell us where in the tabernacle Yeshua was. Perhaps you didn't take notice, but let's revisit the scene. She said that the revelation of Yeshua, the Messiah, which Yahweh gave unto him to show unto the servant things which must surely come to pass, and he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. So the Father gave it to the Son gave it to the angel, and the angel gave it to John, and John took it to the assembly. Are you with me? You see that? I said the gospel is a movement, not a monument, that we have made it. So the word here says that John was given great deal of instructions, but John could not recognize who was speaking to him. Are you with me? Why, you ask, that John could not recognize who was speaking to him, when John himself had served in his ministry, in his cabinet, as one of his chosen three. Peter, James, and John, even leaned on his breast. That's John here writing to us. John could not. Why? Because John had not seen him in his glorified form. Are you with me? John had not seen him in his glorified form. Oh no, John had not seen him that way. So John said in verse 12, and I turned. Oh yes, he looked to see the voice that spake unto me, and being turned, I saw 7 what? Candlestick. John mean I saw 7 lamps, stands. Are you with me? That's what John saw. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, that's what we read earlier. In the midst of the 7 churches, in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the floor, to the foot, girt and the paps with golden girdle. John says, this is what I saw. Now, instinctively, as you read it, you know, where is the lampstand? Where is the menorah? The menorah, as you know, is in the south side of the tabernacle. That's in the holy place. So John says, I saw him in the holy place. So we know where John saw him. So when we read Malachi, Malachi said he is going to come to his temple suddenly. So John, notice the priest would go daily into the holy place, take the blood and sprinkle with the incense up on the golden altar. And that represents our prayers today as they go up. That sweet aroma that sends this beautiful smell to Yah's nostril. That's our prayer when our hearts are clean. Are you with me? Not when your hearts are not clean. Not when you know someone is hurt with you and you have not put it right. You continue to behave sanctimoniously. Are you with me? No. So hold it there, because we must go back to what Sister Yvonne read to understand the whole thing. This is Tehillim, Psalm. Let's go there. Psalm, because too often, because membership in churches are very cheap. It's cheap, isn't it? You won't answer me. I said membership in churches are cheap because all is required is that you get baptized and become a member. Nobody holds you accountable for your behavior these days. And you, because of that, think you're a good and upstanding member of that particular church or denomination because nobody holds you accountable. And when you're held accountable, you get upset and bitter and you just go down the road and join another church. No. So let's look at what Sister Yvonne read. The question is asked, and it's not rhetorical. Chapter 24 and verse 3. Psalm. Who shall ascend into the hill of Yahweh, and who shall stand in the holy place? That's where we said we were going this morning. That's our subject. Beyond the veil in his presence. And David wants to know which of us can make it in. It's a constant, what? Examination. Your impiety will not bring you in there. The question is asked, who shall ascend in the hill of Yahweh? And who shall stand in the holy place? The answer is very clear. The perspicuity of the answer relates to the clarity of the question. Let's read it. He that hath clean hands and pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. You see what I said earlier? That when you have a priest or a bishop who is deceitful, who is teaching you wrong, who is standing at the altar, deceiving you each week, and causing collateral damage, the whole congregation is polluted. A lot of civilized people and civilian in the church who are not part of his war are killed. That's what I mean. That's what we're talking about when you understand the sanctuary. They don't go through the sanctuary. They go through the church, through the denomination, and they teach their own creed. He said to his disciples, go and make disciples of all men. The church said, we will make converts of all men to the church. And that's why people speak the way they speak. They say, oh, I'm a Lutheran and I'm a Baptist. I'm a C of E. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm a Catholic. Another one will say, you know, I am a Methodist. I'm a Jehovah's Witness. The truth is, you may be a Jehovah's Witness, but are you the witness of Jehovah? You may be a Baptist, but were you baptized in Yeshua's name? And so remember, we're in the holy place, and this is the place of learning. The way, the truth. You got to learn the truth, because Paul tells us if you're going to worship him, you must do so in spirit and in truth. So it's in the holy place that you learn the truth. So by the time you get beyond the veil, you live the life. Meaning your spoken theology is now consistent with your lived religion. Are you with me? And so you avoid blaspheming his name, claiming him, but do contrary. You contravene his will when you live outside of his law that scaffolds you. So John says, I saw him. Remember, he says, my sheep hears my voice. Isn't that what the word says? And we're told we must keep our eyes on him. Remember the 144 in Revelation chapter 14. He says they did not have any guile in their mouth. They were not deceived by other women, other churches, other religion. They kept their eyes on the Yeshua, because when you stay with Yeshua and you're watching him and you hear his voice, whenever he moves, hear me, you move with him. And that's what happened during the whole period of the tabernacle. When Yah says stop, they stopped. When he says, all right, move, they move. Not before. And so, but you are only going to hear his voice if you're tuned into him, if your ears are sanctified to his word. Hear me? What does John say? John says, sanctify them by thy truth. Thy word is true. John 17:17. So an hearing that is not sanctified to the word cannot hear his voice. Cannot hear his voice. And a eye that is darkened by the teachings of religion cannot see him. Are you with me? That's why he begs Laodicea, buy of me thyself. Buy of me. See the condition Laodicea is in? The word said Laodicea is blind, naked. Laodicea is into fig leaf religion, fig leaf Christianity, shielding its own self, knowing that it can only be covered by Yeshua, but it's doing the opposite. When you know that the feast days are to be kept and you don't keep them, what does the word say? There is no offering that you can bring. You must be banished from the camp. That's what happened in the old time. He said, the offerings that you bring, including those that we're addressing this morning, the guilt and the sin offering, you bring them for unintentional sin, not deliberate sin. If you're told and then you continue to do something that is contrary to Yah's will, you should be banished, or at least that's how they were, banished from the compound, from the whole camp of Israel, and away from the presence of Yah. Remember, Yah was in the tabernacle, was in the center of the camp, and the people sit around the tabernacle. They sit around, Yahweh was in the middle, and they sit around it. You didn't hear me. Let me say it again. Sister Sonia told us, John says, I see him in the middle of the candlesticks. That's why that tree of life, where was it in the garden? In the middle of the garden. The church is a tree, or choosing knowledge rather than tree of life. So let's go to Daniel. Now that we know that only those who have clean hands and pure hearts can go into the most holy place, let's come with me now to the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel. And the book of Daniel, and we will look at chapter 7. Chapter 7 of the book of Daniel. Well, not 7. Yes, 7, but remember this time, guess where I'm reading from? I'm reading from the Yahweh Bible. Well, I better read from another Bible because, you know, to be consistent with those of you who are listening. That was a chronological Bible, so let's look at the King Jimmy to be consistent with what you have in hand. Daniel chapter 7. You know it very well. I'm going to go to chapter 7, verse 9 and 10. 9 and 10. I beheld till thrones were cast down, and the ancients of days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 ministered unto him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. Wow. That's what Daniel said he saw. And I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words of which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. Earlier, we read from Malachi, and we read from John, Revelation, John writing in Revelation. And we picked up that at that particular time that John saw him, he was in the holy place. Daniel is telling you that he has moved from the holy place. When he ascended into the holy place. Some people will teach you that he ascended into the most holy place. That's not Bible. The Bible says, John said, yeah, I saw him in the midst of the candlesticks. That's the holy place. Daniel here is saying that, well, let's back up a bit, right? And look at what in verse 7 of chapter 7 of Daniel. And this I saw in the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue in the feet, as it was diverse from all the beasts. During the beast, the fourth beast, period, Daniel wants you to know Yeshua would move from the holy place to the most holy. Are you with me? He says, I saw thrones, plural, were cast down. The Ancient of Days, that's Daddy, that's a father, sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool, and his throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheel was burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the what? Books were opened. That's the books with our deeds in them. And every man will be judged according to his deeds. You know, those sins that you sinned deliberately, that you knew that the Sabbath was a Sabbath, the feast days were the feast days, and you did not repent, and there is no offering to offer for those sins that you have committed. It doesn't matter if you bring a bullock, if you bring a lamb, a goat. It says that the offerings were only for unintentional sins. But you have known for a long time that the Sabbath was a Sabbath. You have known that the sin, fornication, adultery. You know that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and the two cannot be mute. You know these things. But you continue to do them, and you prefer to be popular than to be right. You know it. And rather than people who use and abuse these things, the laws of Yah, instead of banishing them outside of the camp, make them an amiable servant among you. So the books are now opened, and you're going to be judged. But the Father is here, and we see no judge, because the Father doesn't judge as anyone. He giveth all judgment to his Son, says John 5:22. So, and he is still talking to us. Come with me to verse 13. Verse 13, Daniel said, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days. So, notice where he's coming from. He's coming from the holy place, and he's now coming to the most holy place. You understand? So if you did not keep your eyes on him, you're tuned to his word, you would not have known that he had moved from the holy place to the most holy. But Daniel wants you to know. Let's read it again for your emphasis. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. That's before the Father. And there was given him dominion and glory and the kingdom, that all people, how many people? All people, nations and languages should serve. What did we talk about this morning? A blended assembly, a blended church. Let's read it again for you. And he was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom. He was given a what? A church? No, a kingdom. Let me repeat that. He was given a kingdom, not a church. and all people, nations and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom, not church, his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. Understand? He came and he moved now from the holy place to the most holy, where he received his kingdom from his Father, where he makes intercession for us. So we now have access in there. Are you with me? That's where the Shekinah is. And so the Shekinah is in there, but where is the ark? The ark is in your heart. He says, I'll make a covenant with you and I will place the laws into your heart. So if the law is in your heart, how can you forget to keep the Sabbath? Come on. Help me. Help me to understand. The laws of Yah are in your heart, but you forget to keep the Sabbath. You forget to keep the feast days. Who is teaching you? Because I know what the disciples taught. They taught all things that Yeshua taught them. So if you think Sabbath is on the first day of the week, who taught you that? Balaam or Jezebel? Somebody else other than Yeshua, because the word says, as it was its custom. Come on. If you are following someone and their custom is such, surely your custom would be the same. As it was his custom, he went into the synagogue. When? On the seventh day of the week. You don't do that. And you claim to be your following and say, my sheep, he says, here's my voice. And if you love me, you will do what? You'll keep my commandment. You lie. Oh, yes. How then do you reconcile the notion that you are going into the holy place beyond the veil, when David makes it clear that only those with clean hands and pure hearts can go in? Open your hearts even as the gates are opening. And let the King of Glory come in. And you ask yourself the question, who is this King of Glory? He tells you. Yeah, mighty in battle. He's strong. Open your hearts. You have heard the word. You continue to sin indiscriminately. And you know there is no offering. There are 5 sacrifices, 5 offerings, aren't there? The burnt offering, the meal offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the trespass offering. And the trespass offering differs from the sin offering because it requires what? Restoration. You have to go and confess your sin. You have to bring your offering and acknowledge and cleanse your soul temple. You have to do that. But the churches, the religionists, they don't practice that anymore because they have abandoned the tabernacle and they have churches. Churches that don't have any Holy of Holies. And churches that have members and no priest. Are you with me? So they follow the creeds. And there is collateral damage. And the people knew it not, that they were being deceived. They didn't know. They didn't know it at all. They did not know that in 1646, America had a law in Massachusetts and the colony that says any child that disobeyed the parents must be put to death. That's America. That's a secular society. Who then understood this? But the church doesn't understand it in 2023. Oh, sad. Oh, sad. Leviticus chapter 16 and verse 9 says, and Aaron shall bring the goat upon which Yahweh lot fell and offer him for a sin offering. Yes? A sin offering. You sin, you got to put it right. Why? Because sin separates you from Yah. So let me just say that ministry is a sacred obligation. It's a sacred obligation. And we need to understand that. And therefore, the minister, the priest, the bishop, he has a responsibility. Notice I'm deliberate in saying he. He has a responsibility to the people, because if he teaches them wrongly, if he misleads them, there is collateral damage. Civilians will die spiritually and they will lose their souls. That's why the priests brought the biggest of all the offerings, a bullock. And he didn't go to the brazen altar. He went to the golden altar because his sin would cause everybody else to sin. And that's what we're seeing happening today. But the people are not listening. So you better come with me to Jeremiah. Come with me to Jeremiah. And let's look at chapter 23. Jeremiah, chapter 23. Woe to the shepherds. Woe to the pastors. Woe to the bishops. Woe to the priests who are destroying and scattering the sheep of my pasture, declares Yah. Therefore, this is what Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, says to the shepherd who tend the people. Because you have scattered the flock and driven them away and have not bestowed care on them, I will bestow punishment on you for the evil you have done, declares Yah. Woe to them. And if you think that's over, you better come with Ezekiel chapter 34. Ezekiel chapter 34. And the word of Yah came to me saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy against them. That's the priest, the bishop, and the rabbis. Prophesy against them. Right? Thus saith Yahweh unto the shepherd, woe to the shepherds of Israel that do feed themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flock? Should not the shepherd, the pastor, the elder, should they not teach the people the truth? But that's not what they do. They eat the fat themselves and leave the people to starve. Yah is against them. That's what Yah is saying. So we need to understand that Yah takes umbrage with these people. But it doesn't matter how long you preach and how consistently you teach. There is someone somewhere who will say, it doesn't matter. It's the same God, they say. And it doesn't matter what day you worship. So therein, if you insolently, boisterously, impertinently, brawlingly, raucously disobediently. Yeah? Impetuosity of your own feelings and ebulliently. Sin, rebel against Yah. He says there is no offering. None. You should only sin by way of a mistake, not deliberately. No offering. So if you're a deliberate sinner, there is a proximity between you and Yah. And there should be a proximity between you and other members of the congregation. Why? Because there is no spiritual affinity among you. That's why Israel banished the people from the camp when they misbehave. They're cut off. There's no physical proximity. There is no spiritual affinity. You have declared your intent, and we see your content. Go home and cleanse your soul temple. That's what they were told. Whosoever soul was not afflicted on the day of atonement, the same person will be cut off from the rest of Israel. We've got to understand these things. The issue here is not the sin alone. Let me say this. The people did not sin and they come and just shove a bullock or a lamb to the priest and they were forgiven. No. The offering was declaring their intent of their hearts. Because when they put their hands on the head of the animal, what was happening inside of them would be transferred on the animal. You can't transfer bitterness onto them. You were supposed to transfer that contrite heart for the sin. Are you with me? You've got to mend the broken relationship that you have with Yah, because sin is the one that broke it, and Yah cannot stomach sin. And that's why there was this veil between the holy and the most holy. And only the high priest could go in. Are you with me? Leviticus 15 verse 31 says, "Thus shall he separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, that they die not in their uncleanness when they defiled my tabernacle that is among them." Oh yes, we must deal with sin. We got to deal with sin. We got to deal with it. So the Kohen, which is a priest, when he sinned, it was a devastating effect upon the assembly. So let us remember that Jude said, Yah is coming to execute judgment. So all those things that we no longer deal with in the church. We have disobedient children. We don't counsel them. In fact, the state says you can't touch them and has lessened the role of the family, and they themselves know the laws. And if you touch them, contrary to what the word says, spare not the rod and spoil the child. But we don't do that anymore. But it doesn't mean the principle or the laws concerning it is done away with. Children, honor your mother and your father. That's what the word says. The commandment, the fifth commandment. We don't stone adulterers now. But the seventh commandment says, thou shalt not commit adultery. It's still there. So you won't deal with it. Yah said, I'm coming to execute judgment on it. And he gives you the category of people who are falling foul of this. So, as we have taken our journey through, we now understand the way. You come to the brazen altar and you empty your load, your cargo of sin. And you bring yourself even as a living sacrifice, and you put that on the altar. Remember, with all the other offerings, most of them, the priest gets some, the person who brings the offering gets some, and the people get some. With the burnt offering, only Yah gets it. Bring yourself, your old self, and let that self burn all night. This is a mandatory offering, just like the guilt offering. You know the brother, the sister is out with you, and you still come praying week after week, teaching week after week, and it's collateral damage. You're injuring innocent people in your congregation. Don't you see that? Don't you care? Where is your bullock? That bullock represents a big repentance and prayer. May that be understood among us, even as we journeyed and we saw the Shekinah, because this day we are there at the mercy seat. Remember, the mercy seat is pure gold. Pure gold. And where does it sit? It sits on top of the law. You didn't hear me. I said the mercy seat sits on top of the law, and you now have the Lord in your heart, but you have no mercy. You see the contradiction that you display? The mercy seat sits on top of the law, but you say you're a law-keeping person, and you're a law-abiding church, but you have no mercy. Oh, you blaspheme the name of Yah when you do that. So let us understand that Yah made the heavens and the earth in 6 days. He rested on the seventh, but he took 40 days to give the instructions to Moses how we should live. So the question is, how then shall we live? In Yeshua's name, I urge you, let us live to please him. In Yeshua's name, amen.